here. All right, you're good, Jim.
Well, I want to thank you for having me. Today I'm going to be talking about the stages of business ownership. If you see my screen, you'll see ownership is in quotation marks. There's a design to that I'll be talking about a little bit later. More specifically, I'm going to be talking about how to get through the stages of business ownership so that you can build a business while having a life. Why this topic is important to me, because I believe as business owners, we wear many hats. In the property management industry specifically, you have to deal with tenants, maintenance requests, you have to deal with collecting payments, dealing with owners. There are so many hats that you all have to wear, it's not even funny. And so often you don't have a lot of time to yourself. And so today, and hopefully shedding some light on the stages of business ownership, I can give you a tip or two that you'll able to juggle a lot of the things that you do so that, again, hopefully you can build a better business to have a better life. Now, today, I'm going to ask you a lot of questions, going to have you reflect a lot. So you're probably going to want to pull out a piece of paper and pen or pencil because I'm going to be making this interactive. One of the things I don't like doing in any of my talks, if any of you've heard me speak, is just to show up and throw up. I really want to impart at least one or two actions or ideas that you can take out of today. Specifically when it comes to talking about the stages of business, it gives you a better understanding. For me, I was first introduced to this years ago by two gentlemen, Mort Murphy and John Heenan out of Ireland, and they realized that there are different stages of business as it relates to big business, but more importantly, how it relates to small business, and more importantly, the toll it takes on the owners themselves. So whether you just started your Keyrenter franchise and you're excited, or you have 200, 300 doors and you're figuring out how to get it all done, I want to hopefully give you, like I said earlier, a tip or two for you to be able to implement to build a better business, to have a life. For those of you who don't know me and haven't heard me speak or have done any research prior to this call, I've been around business my whole life. My parents started a restaurant in northeast Pennsylvania when I was 13. I did that up until I went into the Air Force. And then I got out of the Air Force after 4 years and ran another restaurant, not for my parents, but for another gentleman in Virginia where I finished my tour. I was working for him 80 hours a week, and I thought, well, if I work for him 80 hours a week, what if I work for myself 80 hours a week? Why don't I start my own business? And so I started my first business in 1993. By 1995, I went broke and bankrupt. So that was my first real experience of my own business. And I wish I would have known the stages of business prior to that, because it would have made a big difference to me. Since then, I got a mentor. I built the business, sold it. My latest claim to fame is I used to own a B&I franchise, actually 2 of those in Virginia. I built those and then sold those 10 years ago. And then for the last 13 years, I've been helping companies build better businesses while have a life by understanding the stages of business ownership. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So if you have questions as we go throughout this presentation, please put that into the group chat, and I will ask those along the way. A third way through our talk today, I'm going to pause and have Aaron read some of those questions to me so that I can answer those, because I find a lot of times when I talk about this topic, people have more specific questions to their situation. Whether you have 10 doors or 200 doors, I really want to be able to serve you today. So as I mentioned, I was first introduced to stages of business ownership by Mort Murphy and John Heenan, and they brought this concept that there are stages of business ownership. At that time, when I was first introduced, I thought there was only 2 stages, broke and really broke. But they actually shared with me that there's actually 9 stages that you most likely will experience while building your business. Why do I think this is important? Is because if you know what you're going to experience or run into, then hopefully you can counter those experiences. In other words, another way of saying this, people say, I wish I knew what I knew today back then. And so that's what sort of this is about today. Because so often I find with business owners, their business is running them, they're not running it. One of my favorite questions that I like to ask is, if you were to stop working today, how long would your business run itself? So think about it. If you were to stop working today, how long would your business run itself? 2 minutes? 2 days if you're lucky? 2 months if you're blessed? Most people's business runs them, they don't run it. And then maybe you're fortunate enough that it will run, but then the next question I'd be asking is, would it grow? Because most people won't grow without them. And I say that's not a business, that's more of a job. Now, whether you get paid good at that job, I'd rather you build a business that can run without you, grow without you, freeing you up to do things you want to do for yourself, your family, or even your community. Because I find so often when people start a business, a franchise in particular, they want their business to look like it's just going to shoot up and they're going to be gangbusters, they're going to be successful. But in reality, it feels all over the place. It feels like you're up one day, you're down the other day, and it feels like a roller coaster. How many people does this sound familiar? Why is that the case? Well, I believe that people have the ups and downs is they don't know what they don't know, and there's actually a gap in the business where you are today and where you want to go in the future. And the trick is to bridge that gap, close that gap, so that you can have a better business. So what can you do to do that? Again, it goes back to understanding where you are. Understanding what of the 9 stages you are in so that you can implement the right process or people or system that you need to be able to go to the next stage. In the chat room, I just shared with you a document that I'll be going over, the 9 stages of business. So feel free to open that up and start to read that. I'll go through each of these stages and I'll ask you, what stage are you in? And then I'll ask you to post in the chat room what stage you're in. Are you in stage 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 9? So again, in the chat room, click on that link. It'll give you the 9 stages on your screen. I'll also go through it as well. So what are the 9 stages of business ownership? Stage 1 of business ownership is concept. You have a concept, you have an idea, you think you want to start a business, probably one of the most exciting stages because you're not doing anything yet, you're just thinking about it. Then hopefully you get to stage 2, startup. You've actually bought your Keyrenter franchise. Now you're turning your vision into reality. But the question is, are you going to have enough funds to source the success of your business? Stage 3 is survival. Some of you are probably in this stage where your outside funds have dried up. The business must quickly start generating cash by bringing in paying clients. Quiet desperation sets in. You realize you never knew it was going to be this hard. And most people that I come in contact with, they're in survival, they're struggling, but I'm here to say that there's hope. When I first realized that there were 9 stages and I happen to be facing survival, I realized that there are stages above survival, and for that gives me hope. So what's stage 4? Stage 4, as you'll see on the worksheet I've given you or on your screen, is false stability. Now, when Mort and John came up with the 9 stages originally, they called this stability. But my team really reflected on this, that actually it isn't really stable because, you know, you may be generating enough cash flow at this stage, but if you stop, the business stops. And the challenge with that, I find, is that it's not stable. It depends on you. And so you feel stable, but really it's a false stability. So if you can get past this, then you hopefully will get to stage 5, which is growth, gaining momentum. Stage 6 is expansion, growing beyond capacity, hiring more people, putting more processes in place, to then stage 7, which is what I like to call entrepreneurial euphoria, or false maturity. This is where you're on a high, systems are in place, your next successors have been picked, but the challenge is if you take time off, you're still thinking about the business, you're wondering if your leaders are going to follow the process. So really you can't enjoy your time off because you're worried about the business. For those of you who know my story, my dad passed away of a heart attack at 62. When he died, the business died. We owned a restaurant, and I could see the stress and the strain that he faced every time we went on vacation, every weekend that he'd be off. He'd be thinking about the restaurant and really did not have the true quality of life I would hope he would have had. And so I really want to get people to stage 8. Stage 8 is a mature, a profitable business where you can enjoy the fruits of your labors. A business that if you stop, it still runs. If you stop, it still grows. If it were me and I were you, I would want to know how many doors do I need? How many people do I need in place to be able to truly have a mature business? Because that's really what business should be all about. And then finally, stage 9 is succession. The owner has successfully passed the business on to the next set of owners and the next set of generation, sold the business or opened up another location, another franchise in another area. Some people choose to just stay in the mature side of it. You determine where you want to be. So with that being said, I want you to take a moment to put in the comments in the group chat, what stage are you in? Are you in stage 1, concept? You're about to buy a Keyrenter franchise, which probably you won't be on this call. Startup, you just started just the other day. Survival, false stability. Stage 5, growth, expansion. Stage 7, entrepreneurial euphoria. Or stage 8, maturity, and then succession. So we have a stage 4, we have a stage 6, we have a stage 4. Who else? We have 22 people on the call. If you would put into the chat where you are. Got a stage 3, stage 4. Now, the reason why I want to know the stages is as we go along in today's talk, I want to be able to apply some of the principles to what stage you might be in. So, again, knowing the 9 stages, in my experience, allows us to be able to bridge that gap to knowing where you are today to where you want it in the future. So that you can take your business from being that up and down experience, looking like a roller coaster, to looking like this, which is just growing and growing, maintaining and growing, and having a true successful business. So now that you know what the 9 stages are and you're still looking at what stage you're in, I want to start to now talk about how you can go from one stage to the next. So if you're in stage 3 and you want to go to 4, 4 to 6, 6 to 8, and so on, what would I do if I were you first? Regardless of what business you're in or what stage you're in, the first thing that I would do is to understand what drives your people and what drives your business. I would want to know the drivers that take you from where you are today to where you want to be in the future. So often, money is not the number one motivator, the number one driver for most business success. Studies have shown that time and time again. I think there's something deeper than money that drives us. I think it's a purpose and passion behind our products and services. So what I want to talk about as a step 1 in your success, step 1 of going to the next stage of business, is the 5 drivers. So what are the 5 drivers and how can you apply them to your people and to your business and to yourself? So driver number 1 in getting through the stages of business is, why do you do what you do? What is your purpose and passion? When we first started working with Keyrenter earlier last year, we did a survey to a lot of the franchisees and asking them, why are they in the business? What are they ultimately trying to accomplish? And we have found that the most successful franchisees with Keyrenter, who have a purpose and passion behind this product, whether that's helping owners get more return on their investment, if it's giving tenants a place to live that's clean and quality, or if it's to be able to build a business where you can employ other people to provide for their families, I promise you, you will be more successful than most people. Some of those surveys said that they're doing Keyrenter or doing the franchise because they want to make more money. And that's fine, but the money is just a tool to get to where you ultimately want to be in life. Hopefully have a better lifestyle, provide for your family, do more things for fun. But it begins with your purpose and passion. And so if you were in front of me today and we were doing this in a live audience, I would be asking you, why do you do what you do? What is your purpose behind and passion behind the product? Is it to get your owners a return on investment? Is it to employ people so you can provide for their families? Is it to build a better community? Or is it, no offense, for your own reasons? And is it about you? There's nothing wrong with it being about you, but there's more purpose and passion behind your product, the more successful you'll be. For example, the founder of West Airlines, his goal was to help everybody be able to afford flying. The founder of Southwest, his number 1 goal was to be able to have more people, if not every person, be able to fly to see their families throughout the United States. And look how successful they are today. You have Bill Gates with Microsoft. He wanted to educate kids. He wanted to educate families. And his goal was to have a computer on every person's home, every person's desk, so that they can learn and educate themselves and better themselves. So if it were me and I were you, I'd be asking myself and the people that work for me, why do we do what I do? Your vision and your values, your purpose and your passion. That's the first place that I would start. Next, the next driver that I would be asking myself and my people is, where do you want to be beyond the business? What are your dreams and your aspirations? So often when I ask people, where do they want to be beyond the business? What would they be doing for fun? 9 times out of 10, the answer is, I don't know, Jim. I then go on and asking them, if you had enough money and enough time and everything was taken care of, what would you do for fun? Again, the answer is, Jim, I don't know. I haven't thought about it in a long time. If you've been in business for 2 or 3 years, even 4 years, a lot of times we lose sight of our dreams and our aspirations because our business starts running us versus us running it. For example, I was working with the flooring contractor years ago, and I asked her those questions. If you had enough time and money in the bank, what would you do for fun? She says, I don't know. I said, okay, if you had $3 to $10 million in the bank, what would you do for fun? She said, well, I would pay down debt. I said, then what would you do after that? Well, then I buy more equipment. And I realized that she really didn't know the answer to my question. And so I started thinking, how do I get ahead of what she's going to say next? So I said, if you had enough time and money, you had $3 to $10 million in the bank, your debt was paid off, your bills were paid off, you had inventory, you had the best people, what would you do for fun? And she said, Jim, I haven't thought about that in a long time. And I said to Maureen, her name's Maureen, I said, if you were to guess one thing you would do, the first thing she said is I would go to Disney with my kids. And then I would get an RV and travel across the country with my family. And you can hear in her voice, and it started to lift up. It started to have some excitement in it, almost probably like she didn't have that excitement in a long time. And so we went on to helping her to achieve that goal, to be able to build a business that can thrive and survive without her, and her to start living her life again. So I'd be asking myself, if I had enough doors, I had enough processes, I had enough people, I had enough profit, what would I do for fun? And start to take time to do that. Don't wait to be successful to start enjoying your life. Enjoy your life along the way. The third thing that I would do, the third driver that I would have, is I would look at, what do I want my Keyrenter franchise to look like? What do I want my property management business to look like? What is my vision and mission, not only now, but my vision and mission in the future? Most people don't think about what they want their business in the future. They just want to deal with today's problems, and that's all they ever think about. Whereas if it were me and I were you, and I wanted to be able to get through the stages of business, the thing that I would be doing is thinking about what I wanted my business to look like in the future. How many people would I have in place? Would I have a showing person, or would I use showing software? Would I have property managers that work underneath me? Would I have a maintenance division, a maintenance company, or would I be subbing that out? I believe that if you paint the picture of what you want your business to look like in the future, you'll get through the stages quicker than if you only worry about what your business looks like today. And I'll give an example about that in a moment. But I believe if you start to think bigger, you become bigger. If you think about today, you then worry about today. And then last but not least, the last 2 drivers is, when do you want all this to happen? Picking a date in the future, preferably 2 to 3 years from now. And then what is your next waypoint or milestone that you need to take your business to get where you ultimately want to go, and accomplishing that. So ultimately, if I would want to get from stage 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 6 to 7, 7 to 8, the first thing that I'd be asking myself and my people, what drives us? Why do we do what we do? Where do we want to be beyond the business? What do we want to be doing for fun? Start to figure out where we would travel, if it's travel, give back to the community, our charities, our churches, our places of worship. What do we want our business to look like now, more importantly in the future? And then when do we want that to happen versus hope it happens? And then what's the next steps or the next waypoint we need to take? So I just want to take a moment now to see if there are any questions. I told you I would take a moment to take and ask if there's any questions, clarifications that may apply to you in your stage before I go into the next set of things that I would do to get through the stages of business ownership. Any questions, comments, clarifications? If you would put them in the chat, that would be great.
Calvin says, my wife and I was just talking about this yesterday. And I would say amen to the live life now, not later on. I look to my parents for that, and they were a horrible example of we're going to do all this when we retire. And they're in retirement today. My mom's a wheelchair bound and has been for the last 3 years. So that's retirement for them.
Wow. Wow.
And I said, hell no, not me.
Yeah. Well, great. If you guys have any questions, comments, and things that you want to share with me after this call, maybe you didn't want to take the time today in the group setting, I've just put my contact information in the chat. You can just click on that, enter your contact information, and ask your questions, comments, or anything you'd like to contribute. I do like hearing stories of people who are having the successes, or if you're stuck, how can you get past that?
Jim, the last half of Calvin's question here is kind of interesting. Do you want me to read that?
Yes, please.
It says, we took a day off on Saturday. Today, Monday, we are feeling a bit overwhelmed. Not a bit overwhelmed, really overwhelmed. I really don't have a question about it, but kind of wondering what to do to keep this overwhelming feeling from being there.
Great question or comment. So I won't be going into this today as it relates to the slides, but one of the things I would be doing is look at the 5 pillars of profit and performance. In fact, I'll actually go into that. It's actually the next thing, so it's a perfect segue. I don't want to lose what Brendan has to say, so if that applies to that, but I want to go into responding to that. So I mentioned my dad, when he would take time off, he would be thinking about the business. He'd be worried about the compressor in the basement going out in the freezer and the food thawing out. And he consumed himself with that. And I think a lot of the things that overwhelm us is because we run our businesses in our heads. And if we can get what's in our heads down on paper, I think we'll have less of an overwhelmed feeling. And one of the tools that I use is what I call the 5 pillars of profit and performance. So I'll pull that up on my computer here. So on your screen, you'll see the 5 pillars of profit and performance. And what I have found is, going back to the many hats that we wear, the balls that we juggle, a lot of things that we deal with in business can come down to these 5 pillars, things that are related to these 5 categories. The first category is bringing in business. Second category, as we grow, we need to hire and train our people. Then there is getting the work done. Then there's admin finance. And then if you're lucky enough to get ahead, then you want to create raving fans. By creating raving fans, given that customer experience, they start to rave about you, and them raving start to refer you more business. And so, Calvin, if you want to reach out to me and we grab a cup of coffee or do a consult over the phone, I would love to see more specifically what you're overwhelmed about. But for me, one of the things that I want to do is, before I get back from vacation or before I go on vacation, is write down all those things that are on my mind as it relates to these 5 areas. Because typically when you come back on a Monday, there are going to be 22 different things that are going around in your head. There's going to be 22 voicemails, emails, whatever that is. And if you can sort them and organize your thoughts into these categories, then you can address them and attack them and complete them accordingly. So that's what my 2 cents on that would be. Again, not being specific enough to your situation, I have found that when I become overwhelmed at any time in my business, even in the middle of the week, if I can take this document and start writing down in these 5 areas what's on my mind, get it off my mind, then I'm less overwhelmed. So hopefully that's helpful to you. That's just one tool that I use to be able to better manage my mind and deal with the overwhelmed feeling. Hopefully that helped. You're welcome. So Brandon, you had something. So Brandon says, I'm 32 years old, so I don't feel a need to get the business working independent of me. Part of my role, my business serves me, is needing me and giving me a sense of purpose. I always struggle a bit with the build it so it doesn't need you from my standpoint. So that's a great statement. And it's a misconception so often. So there's a book out I highly recommend you read, is called Built to Sell. Built to Sell by John Warlow. A lot of you may have heard of E-Myth by Michael Gerber. E-Myth is another great book about building a business that's franchisable, that's duplicatable, more importantly, scalable. Where email ends up, Built to Sell finishes off. In other words, Built to Sell takes E-Myth and teaches you how to implement the principles of E-Myth. And John Warlow, who wrote that book, is called Built to Sell, Creating a Business That Can Thrive Without You. And so often people think when we say build a business can run without you, it doesn't mean that it will run with, or that you won't be in the business anymore. It means that you have a business that you can leave the business, take time off, or do whatever you want to do. Because what I find is the more the business can run without you, the more valuable it is. So I've had 3 businesses, successful businesses in my life. The first business that I had that was successful, I practically gave it away. I mean, literally gave it away and say, hey, you can have it. You just cover my expenses, it's yours, because I was the business and it was really not valuable at all. The second business I sold as is. I sold it as is because it could run somewhat without me, but it wasn't really big enough and valuable enough because it didn't run without me completely. And then the third business I sold for a lot of money because not only could it run without me, it was growing with me. In fact, I didn't plan on selling it. When the gentleman came up to me and says, Jim, I heard you're selling your business. I said, no, not really. It's not running without us. He goes, but I want to buy it. And I said, well, you're going to have to pay a lot. And he paid me a lot. And I realized at that moment, because it could run without me and grow without me, I could ask for more. But interesting enough, I didn't have to sell it, but because at that time I was looking for a different lifestyle, I did sell that. So I'm glad you made that statement that building a business that doesn't need you, it's really more that can run without you so that you can do as much in the business or outside the business is what we find that helps you to be successful. So just something to consider. I'll talk a little bit more about that in detail later on, but I appreciate you sharing that. What's the reasonable time to expect between stages 6 and 7? That's a good question. I would suggest you reach out to me. We'll talk more about that. That's depending on the personality. So a lot of times going from a 6 to 7 has to do with processes in place and your people. So when you have your processes and people in place, it's a lot easier, but so often people aren't so often owners are not good with people. Or worse yet, they've hired the wrong people and those people aren't following the processes. So I'm afraid I can't answer the question specifically to you, but if you want to reach out, I'll go into more specifics based on you, your where you are, how big you are, how many doors you have, how profitable you are. But a lot of times going from stages 6 to 7, going from expansion to entrepreneurial euphoria or false maturity is a people process, and juggling between the two of those will make how good you're at that will determine how quick that you can go through those stages. So keep the questions coming. I really appreciate that. But I want to get back into helping you get through the other stages. So that was a great question. So thank you. Keep them coming. So what do I want to talk about next? So next, what I want to talk about is what you can do is the what. So going more specific into the what, I think the next thing that you could do to get through the stage that you're in is to look at your organizational structure. As I mentioned earlier, what do you want your business to look like in the future? So early stage business owners have the pillars we talked about earlier. They have bringing in business, then they got to manage their properties, and then hopefully they create raving fans with those owners by giving them a great experience, by getting a good return on their investment, getting little to no problems heading their way, receiving their checks on their investments. That's typical business ownership. You're doing those 3 functions yourself. And then as you grow, you have bringing a business. Now you have to hire people to help get some of the work done. And then you have a lot more admin finance. And then hopefully you'll take the time to create raving fans refer, keeping the business going. But then what I would do, again, to get to the next stage is to look to the future and look at what you want your business to look like, as we talked about earlier, is are you going to have someone who specializes in helping you with the showings? Or are you going to use the showing softwares that are out there? Are you going to have a specialist that helps you with the move-ins and move-outs? Or are you going to do them all? Are you going to do all of these functions? And then eventually maintenance. Are you going to do your own maintenance? You're going to sub out the maintenance? You're going to start your own maintenance company? The point of all of this is, if it were me and I were you, I would ask myself, how many of these roles am I running myself now? Like, how many am I doing today? Because if you're doing them all, then you're not going to have a valuable business, and you're probably not going to have a quality of life. But there are vendors and suppliers out there. Keyrenter has shared a lot of those with you. Keyrenter Salt Lake uses a lot of those that I would recommend that you start to delegate, because the more that you can delegate and get off your plate, the less you do, the more valuable your business is. So one of the ways of doing that is to hire better people. And in fact, one more thing is, this is a great hiring tool. And let me explain that to you. So for some of you, you're not hiring right. And because you're not hiring right, you're not getting people to do the work, and then you're letting them go, and then you're blaming them, and you're taking back that hat. You're taking on that role to do yourself. Whereas what I would be doing in hiring, and how I go about it, is I use my organizational structure that I see in the future, and then hire them to show them that there's places to move up in the organization. For example, most people hire people, they find them, vet them, hire them, and then don't train them, and then they don't work out. And it's usually a 3 to 5 step process. Where when I'm working with property management companies, I'm showing them a 22-step process, the things that you do before you hire them, in the process of hiring them, and even after hiring them. For example, this org chart example, if I'm hiring somebody today, I might say, hey, I'm going to hire you to handle my showings. I want you to handle my showings, and if you do a good job there, then I'll allow you to be promoted to move-ins. And if you do good at move-ins, then I'll allow you to help me with move-outs. And then maybe one day you'll be able to manage properties for me and move up and be one of my 5 property managers I plan to have. And then someday you might be in charge of operations or hiring and training, or maybe even be a manager. What I have found that most people don't have org charts, and when they hire people, they hire them for a particular position today and don't paint the picture in the future. So if you haven't done that, I highly recommend use this as a starting point, as an org chart. And when hiring people, don't just hire for just a property manager or just a sales assistant. Look at them at the bigger picture. Look at where they are today, and ask them where they want to be in the future, and see if they are going to be a fit for your business as you grow. And that will help you get through 6 and 7 per that question ahead of time, or even from 4 to 5 as you go from false stability to expansion to growth. So that's another thing that I would be doing is painting that picture of what I want the business to look like. Using this as a hiring tool would make the biggest difference. So what else can you do? And by the way, I have a lot more that I'll be able to go into today that you could do for your business. So if you want the top 10 things that I would do to grow your business or get it to the next stage, again, reach out to me. I'd be more than glad to share that with you. My contact information is in the group chat. What else I would do if I were you, the next step in growing my business beyond the stages of business ownership, is I would know my numbers. I would want to know my numbers. I could probably do a whole webinar on this, but for some of you, if you are in stages 2 to 4, the first thing that I would want to know is, how many doors do I need to break even? Now, just as a footnote, because I'm talking to property managers, they always push back on this. When I say how many doors, I mean profitable doors. I don't mean any doors. I assume that you've gone through Nate's training, and Nate has taught you how to figure out what profitable door is. And so anytime I talk about the number of doors, I mean profitable doors. So if you don't know what a profitable door is, I highly recommend you look into that. Don't take on a door for taking on a door's sake. So the first thing that I would be doing if I was in stages 2 to 4 is know, how many doors do I need to break even? How many doors do I need to take a paycheck? And finally, how many doors do I need to hire myself an assistant? Whether it's a sales assistant, a property management assistant, an admin assistant, I believe that everyone should have an assistant. In fact, I believe in the philosophy of the wise man, George Carlin. George Carlin approached the building a business. I don't know if you know who George Carlin was, but he was a wise individual, a comedian for those of you who know him. And he said something early on in my career that I didn't get then, but I get now. His approach to building a business, George Carlin would say that you should get yourself an assistant, and then get an assistant for your assistant, and then get an assistant for your assistant's assistant, and so on and so on and so on. And eventually you'll be a CEO of a bunch of assistants. And most people laugh at that, but I look back now and I realize how many people wait to get an assistant. Again, whether it's a sales assistant, an admin assistant, a property management assistant, a move-in, move-out assistant. I think everyone deserves an assistant so that you can start building a better business. In fact, I think if I did the math correctly, a part-time assistant could cost you as little as $250 a week. $250 a week. How many doors is that? 4 doors, 8 doors, and you can afford an assistant? But most people haven't done the math on what it takes to hire the next person. And so they don't necessarily pull the trigger soon enough. And then they're doing too much, too long. And that's what causes burnout. So if it were me and I were you, I'd be looking at 2 to 4. How many doors do I need to break even, take a paycheck, and then hire people? If I'm in stage 4 to 6, I'd be looking at how many doors do I need to do all of that, and then maybe starting to invest in more marketing, more target marketing, or to invest in certain softwares that are out there that are available to be able to run your business more efficiently. I would be looking at that. And then if I was stages 6 to 8, I would want to know the numbers and how I can afford better leadership so that then those leaders can run my business, freeing me up to do the parts and pieces of the business that I love doing over others. So I could, again, do a whole talk on that, but if you haven't done the math of how many doors for those things, that would be the next thing that I would do to get to the next stages. And most people I talk to in the property management industry don't know how many doors they need to do any of that stuff. And so maybe today, out of all the things that I said today, which I've covered a lot, that's the one thing that you're going to walk away with in figuring out for yourself. Next, a thing that you could do based on what stage of business you're in is bring business in on a regular, consistent basis. In other words, never stop bringing in business no matter how overwhelmed you get. That is a contrary to the human mind as to you are in the fight or flight type of mentality. But I have found so often what business owners do, they get overwhelmed with as much business they bring in. They stop their marketing, they stop their reviews, they stop networking, and that's when they have those ups and downs of business. If I had time to talk more about this, I'd be talking about the difference between marketing, networking, and selling. They're not the same thing. I've seen so often that people are doing marketing and they think marketing leads to sales or networking leads to sales. It's a whole formula. Again, if I had time, I'd be talking about marketing being the visibility of your business. Networking would be the credibility, the connections that you make. And then the selling is the profitability through the processes that you use to get owners to buy from you. And each one of those segments have things that I would want you to know, but due to time, we don't have to go into all of those things. But I find that when it comes to bringing a business, that some of you on the call today are great at finding the business, but not necessarily closing the business. Some of you are good at presenting the offer that you bring to the table, but not necessarily finding it. And then some of you are great at closing, but not necessarily good at presenting and finding. And what I mean by that is, give an example. So often I have people say to me, just get me in front of them and I can close them. That's a flag for me that says, okay, they're great at closing, but they're not good at finding. Or I've heard people say, I can find the opportunities, but I just can't close these owners. I'm going to say for you, it's a presenting problem, maybe even a prospecting problem. And Aaron, I would just share for you from an organizational perspective, as you train and develop your Keyrenter franchisees, that some are great at finding, so we need to give them tools for presenting and closing. And some are good at closing, and for those people, we have to give them tools for finding and presenting. And so I would just keep in mind that these are three different functions. They work independent of or dependent of each other, but also independently of each other. And understanding that could help some of you go to the next stage. For example, for those of you who are in stages 2 to 4, I would say get reviews, get networking like BNI or referral groups, get involved in NARPM to network other property managers. If I was in stages 4 to 6, I'd be looking at owners who have more properties than the owners you started with. So maybe an owner you brought on had 3 or 4 properties. Now you want to maybe do owners with 10 to 20 properties. And that requires different target marketing, different marketing messages. And those of you who are in 6 to 8, if you haven't already done that, get rid of your unprofitable properties and figure out who your best properties are, and then find out where those people came from and network with those. So those are just some things that I would do if I were you to bring in business on a regular, consistent basis. Well, we have a little bit time left, and I just want to go a couple more tips. Again, feel free to reach out to me for these tools, my PowerPoint, and/or any other things I didn't cover to help you get through the stages. But there's a couple last things I want to talk about that I think are important to any stage, and that is block timing. Block timing is a concept of blocking your time, a focused amount of time to be able to juggle your time, to be able to deal with the many hats that you deal with. Block timing, as we see it, comes from 3 books. The Powerful Engagement, The 7-Minute Difference by Alison Lewis, and Stephen Covey's 8th Habit. What I have found that if you read The Powerful Engagement, they will say that managing your energy, not time, is the key to performance and personal renewal. In other words, time management is a myth. Time management, you can't manage time. Time is just time. But you can manage your environment. You can manage your energy. And if you do that, you will become more effective, more focused. You'll get more done in less time. And more importantly, you'll have more energy for your family, for your kids, for your community. Some of the myths that you may have heard is that time management is really all about distraction management. Multitasking is really, it's ineffective. It's what I call switch tasking. And some of you are trying to work harder, meaning more hours versus working smarter. Some interesting statistics out of those 3 books that I talked about, these 3 books, was one statistic is that the average person is effective 23% of the day. So if you work an 8-hour week, which most of us don't, but if you were lucky to work 8 hours, you'd be effective 23% of the time. That means less than 2 hours where you're focused and being effective, like truly effective. According to Stephen Covey's 8th Habit, if you have one goal, the chance of you achieving that goal, and I would say task or role or goal, is 97%. But if you have 2 goals or 2 roles or 2 things you're working on at any given time, I believe it goes down to 64%. And then if you have 3 goals, forget it. The odds of you getting any one of those done goes down to less than 24%. And the last interesting statistic I have found is that it takes 15 minutes to switch your brain from one activity to the other. In other words, if you're doing marketing for an hour and then you switch to accounting, your brain literally takes 15 minutes for it to re-gear itself for a new category of work. And that's a lot of times why we get burnt out at the end of the day. If you ever wonder at the end of the day why you feel so exhausted, or some of us say, thank God it's Friday, is because most likely you ended up multitasking. And again, studies have shown that multitasking is a myth. It's ineffective. Alison Lewis finds that your brain takes 15 minutes to switch from one category of business to another category of business. So if for me and I would do you to be more effective, have more energy, is I would work to have a block calendar. And a block calendar simply is simply blocking time to do specific activities, whether it's prospecting. Say you do prospecting on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays because that just works for you. And prospecting, what I mean by that is getting your reviews, doing your marketing, getting the word out there, possibly even networking is what I would consider prospecting. And then from those efforts, you would hopefully get appointments that you schedule in the afternoon from say 2 to 4, sitting down with owners that want to find out more about your products and services. or doing one-to-ones with people from your networking groups. I might do those in the afternoon because that just works for you. And then for others, they want to do their paperwork on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Now, I would ask you, why would you want to do something like this? Why would you want to have a calendar or a routine like this? I have found because it's repetitive, it's repeatable, and more importantly, it's predictable. I know that Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays that I'll be doing my prospecting activities to generate me appointments in the afternoon, and then I don't have to worry about the paperwork till Tuesdays and Thursdays, versus if I don't have it scheduled, I'll be worrying about when I'm going to be doing all these things, and that worry tends to lead to stress, which tends to drain the energy, that tends to burn us out. So that's just an example. This is an actual live example. I was working with a financial planner where her prospecting was all over the map. Meeting with her boss was all over the map, and she couldn't win. And so we created a pattern that worked best for her. For others, I might suggest they don't need the prospect activities as much. So you might do prospecting on Mondays and Wednesdays, and then have your appointments in the mornings on Tuesdays and Thursdays, because maybe you're better in the morning for your appointments. And so it's better to do your appointments in the morning because you're sharper, you're more focused, and you'll have better results. And then do your paperwork in the afternoon so that you can go home and not have to think about work anymore. But more importantly, in this particular example, I would encourage you to have a date night. Or another way of saying that is do something for yourself. What do you do for yourself? The example of this, I was working with a realtor, and a very successful realtor here in the Richmond market, and her numbers were down, and so she hired us to help her get her business back up and running. And so I started to assess her business to find out, well, what did she do last year that she wasn't doing this year? And she said to me, nothing. I said, there's got to be something that you were doing last year that you weren't doing this year. And she says, nah, there's this one. No, it can't be that. I said, what was that? She said, well, there's this one thing, but I don't think it has anything to do with anything. I said, what is it? And she said that I used to get my nails done every week. And then I said, okay, well, let's get your nails done. She goes, oh, no, I don't need to do that. I said, well, we're going to do that. As your coach, my job is to encourage you to do things that are going to help you. So what I want you to do is, because it worked, you did it last year, let's see if it has anything to do with this year. So she started getting her nails done. About a month and a half later, I reached out to her to see how she was doing, and I noticed that her numbers were up. And I asked her what she did differently. And she said, well, I did what you told me to do. And again, it'd been a month and a half. I didn't remember. I said, what did I tell you to do? She said, you told me to get my nails done. I said, oh, okay. And well, I get my nails done every Wednesday morning. And I said, okay, tell me more. She says, it's not the fact that I get my nails done every Wednesday morning. It's the fact that when I'm getting my nails done, I'm working on my business. I'm thinking about what I need to do. And I realized I got caught up in the distractions of life, the stresses and strains of running a business, and I stopped working on my business. I was running in my business. And so that Wednesday morning gave me a time to reflect on what did I do Monday and Tuesday, and what do I yet have to do Thursday and Friday. I've shared that story several times now. I had someone who owned a chain of Nextel communication stores. He did the same thing, not his nails, but he got coffee. He would get coffee in the paper every Wednesday morning to take time for himself, get away from his family, get away from his employees. And it was the one time a week that he took for himself, and he had a huge success that year. So if you haven't taken the time for yourself or for your loved ones, that one time a week that you do something, whether it's meditate, run, workout, date night, or anything like that, I would highly encourage you to consider that as something to help you get to the next stage. The way I look at block timing is like they tell you in the airlines when you're flying, it's your oxygen. If you don't take care of yourself, who's going to take care of you? And one of the first ways of taking care of yourself to give you life, to give you oxygen, is this schedule. By keeping a schedule that's repeatable, duplicatable, it'll make the biggest difference. Last but not least about that, some of you are saying, well, Jim, what about all the problems that we have? Well, you can actually schedule in firefighting time. I won't go into that because we're running out of time, but there's firefighting time, but more importantly, fire prevention time. How can you predict the problems you're going to have in advance so that you can be proactive versus always being reactive in this industry? Some tips and tricks. I won't have time to go into but there's some things that you can do to make all of this work. But ultimately, taking the time for yourself will make a big, big difference. Well, we're just about out of time. I want to finish up. Last couple of tips or things that I would do is give up control. And how to do that is hire right. We've talked a little bit about that earlier. I would focus on customer experience, not necessarily customer service. Customer service is what people expect. Customer experience goes above and beyond and creates that raving fans. How you can do that? Someone just asked me last week. I was at a NARPM chapter. The first thing I would do is send handwritten thank you cards to my owners, thanking them for their business this year, thanking them for trusting in your business, allowing them to trust them with your properties. Something as simple as that can make a big difference. If we had more time, I'd talk about leadership, creating the business that can thrive without you, getting people to do the things you don't want to do or do the things that get your business to the next level. But last but not least, as I finish up, is seek support. Don't be a Lone Ranger. Don't be a Lone Ranger. Even Lone Ranger had Tonto and Silver, and he didn't do it by himself. Reach out to corporate, reach out to your mentors, reach out to NARPM members, reach out to each other. Most importantly, reach out to each other. Learn from each other's mistakes, but more importantly, learn from each other's success. So these are just some of the things that you can do to get through the 9 stages. Understanding what drives you, your people, to get you where you are today will help you to manage the many hats, the many tasks, the juggling, and ultimately, what I want to see for you all is to have that work-life balance where you can enjoy the journey while you build your business. I want to thank you all for having me. Again, if you have any questions or you want to reach out to me, please feel free to do that. I turn it back over to you. Aaron, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate that. I really enjoy having you here. And so that is what we've got today. Jim, do you want to take any quick questions? Or?
I'm more than glad to do that.